The first generation Audi R8 was a very special car. I feel it was way ahead of its time, not just in the design but also in the performance. What I want to do in this video is show you the comparison between the 2003 Audi Le Mans concept that then turned out to be the Audi R8, and then compare the first generation R8 to the current one and what I think went wrong there. So the Audi R8 was designed to be neither arrogant, aggressive or vulgar. It was designed to stand out primarily for its elegance. That was the key word that the designers want to implement in the first generation R8. It was not sportiness and it was not aggressive styling. The R8 is engineered to be a well-balanced mid-engine sports car first of all, but it also needed to be a car that can be driven daily in comfort and not just on the weekends. It was Audi's first mid-engine sports car that combined the racing experience with the innovative design and technological expertise of Audi. For the styling, the design team wanted the R8 to look like it is tensing its muscle in readiness, almost like a sprinter on the starting blocks. The car was developed from, as I said, the 2003 Audi Le Mans prototype, and the transition here from concept to production is one of the best ones I can remember from the mid-2000s. It's really astonishing how they managed to capture the essence of the Le Mans and turn that into production. And I actually think the production version Audi R8 looks better than the concept, which is very unusual, specifically for internal combustion engines of the 2000s. So let's have a look at the R8 here and what's really going on. So let's start with the front view here. And as you can see, I'm going to show you the Le Mans first, the concept up top, and then compare the first generation to the second generation R8. Talk about a little bit why I don't like the current generation R8, because of the philosophy that they implemented in the first generation is kind of lost in the new one. More on that in a minute. But what I want to show you here is the front graphics and how cool this design was when it came out and then turned that into production. As you can see, all the key lines here of the Le Mans concept, which was shown in 2003, and the audience just went nuts over this design, and Audi of course figured out that they need to make this a reality based on the reception that this concept got from the audience and the public, and that's why they decided to take pretty much the exact same shape that we have in the Le Mans concept and turn that into the production version. This is a facelifted first generation R8, which in my mind is the best looking, by far the best looking Audi R8 out there. When they did this small little facelift and implemented the LEDs in the front end, LED strips instead of the dots that we have on the first generation that goes something like this. It just looks a lot modern than the first non-facelifted R8, but at the same time it keeps the original proportions and the graphics of it. So looking at the front graphics of the Le Mans and looking at the transition into the production, you can see that all of these lines that we have in the Le Mans concept are all visible in the production version. It's almost like they just copy-pasted the concept and turn that into the production right here. And what I love about the R8 in particular is the positioning of the headlights was really interesting when I first saw the R8. I remember them feeling like they sat so low down in the front end, and it made it look very, even though they didn't want it to be an aggressive styling, it makes it look like it's leaning forward, specifically when we look at the side view here in a minute. Looking at the rear view of the Le Mans concept up here and the production version, this is the non-facelifted version of the R8 down here, and this is of course the first Le Mans concept. And same thing here, just look at how well the concept, the lines of the concept up here transitions into the production version. We have some differences right here. So for example, we don't have a center exhaust like we have on the concept right here. Instead, we have quad exhaust, which I kind of prefer here. The exhaust setup that I prefer the most is the V10 setup, when you have, instead of two separate ones right here, you just have one big on each side, one oval. I think that looks the best on the Audi R8, like two bazookas on each side of the tail end. But the overall proportions here in the graphics, you can see that the quattro lines we're gonna have a look at in side view are clearly visible on both the concept, and then that turned into the production version right here as well. Same with the taillights, have the same kind of setup in the production version, and the overall, of course, greenhouse right here, same kind of lines as we have in the concept Le Mans as well. I even think that they managed to get the stance correct from the get-go of the very first V8 R8, and it doesn't look like it's a production stance, if that makes sense. Usually what happens is you can see that the stance here, that the wheels are almost flush with the bodywork here in the concept. It's not really that flush with the bodywork in the production version. Somehow all the pieces just work really well together and create a balanced stance for the first generation Audi R8. Now this is of course the most important view, which is the side view right here, and this is where I can see that I think the production version looks better than the Le Mans concept. And how often can you say that, specifically when we're talking about, as I said, internal combustion engines from the mid 2000s? Usually what happens is companies put out a really cool concept, then it gets engineered and productionized, I guess we could call it, and it completely loses the stance and the proportions and everything. Here I think it's the other way around. I think this looks good, the Le Mans concept, definitely it's a cool looking car, but I think it looks even better in the production version. And the reason for that, if we look for example in the front end here of the Le Mans concept, it's a little stubby right here. It doesn't look like it's stretching out its full potential in the front end when it comes to the proportions, but it does that in the production version. You can see that it feels a little sleeker here in the front end in the production version. I really like the chiseledness that they added to the front end of the production version compared to the Le Mans concept right here. And also I'm not sure if the wheelbase is different here from the concept to the production, but I feel like the wheelbase is a little longer on the production version. I might be wrong there, but it feels like it's stretched out, more elegant lines in the production version than we have on the Le Mans concept up here. And of course, one really controversial graphic of the Audi R8 is this side blade right here. Nobody understood why this is a different color. In some cases, carbon fiber side blade that goes right here, and it was a ballsy move by Audi to put that out there because it's never been done before, and it really contrasts the overall graphics of the rest of the car, because we have a big blade almost in the middle here, kind of separating the rear end of the R8 from the front end. But at the same time, if we didn't have that blade there, I don't think the Audi R8 would have been such a memorable design without the blade there. So I think this, even though it was something new, sometimes a little detail like this is what actually makes the car memorable, because without this, there are cars that don't have it be contrast color and it just doesn't feel the same. The proportions look a little off when this is not a contrasted color. If this was a body color, this rear end kind of looks a little too long on those R8s that are spec'd without a contrasting side blade like this. And of course, we also have the quattro lines. Audi at this time, they had a very elegant way of styling cars. For example, the Audi A5 is, in my opinion, one of the best looking two-doors coupes of the 2000s. They did that by keeping very strict rules for how they design cars. For example, we have the three key lines right here of the Audi R8. You can see the shoulder line here goes straight and then it bulges over the axles right here, and it does this, it has this little curvature over on top of both axles to kind of emphasize the quattro four-wheel drive system and add some muscle on top of those, and I think it looks really cool. This has since changed in the new version of the R8, specifically the greenhouse line here, which I don't like in the new R8. I'm going to show you exactly why right now when we jump in and have a look at the new generation R8 and compare it to the old generation. So of course, here is the front view of both generations. This is the current one, and of course down here the facelifted first generation, my favorite Audi R8. What Audi wanted to do with the first generation is have some sort of elegance. They didn't want to focus on an aggressive styling. They didn't want to make something that looks angry and over stylized. So I think they did it really well here. You can see that the line flow of the fenders, for example, go into the graphic right here and then continues down here, and everything is framed really nicely here. Same thing with the lines that goes from the A-pillar onto the hood. It then connects to the graphic in the front end right here. We have this line going in here and then connects to the front front end and kind of frames the graphic right there as well. And everything is, there's a lot of horizontal lines here. It just creates a very elegant, graceful looking front end of the Audi R8. And you can see the piece down here is very, very simple as well. There's no complex lines here. It's all elegant, and I think they achieved that key word that they wanted to have on the first generation R8, which was elegance instead of aggressiveness. But it still looks like an exotic because it's so low, headlights sit way out, so when you see this coming at you, you know this is a special car. So comparing this to the current generation, and you can see that it's not elegant anymore at all. They lost the first key word that they wanted to implement for the Audi R8, which was elegance. That doesn't exist anymore. This is way too aggressive for being an R8. If we go back to the first philosophy of how they wanted to design the R8, which was, as I said, elegant and not aggressiveness, this is like an Audi Huracan to me. It looks way too similar to the Lamborghini design of or philosophy of styling. They two have become too melted into each other, and this doesn't stand on its own as a standalone design philosophy anymore. This is kind of like copy-paste Lamborghini design language, which is in itself, it's maybe not really a bad thing, but I would love Audi to be more separated from Lamborghini when it comes to the styling. I think Audi is over stylizing their cars right now, and they're going into this aggressive styling that I don't want to see every single manufacturer do, and I think that's why the first generation Audi R8 looks so much better, and it's so much more in line, in my opinion, with what Audi's design philosophy is. So having a look at the rear view, in my opinion, of the new generation looks a whole lot better than the front view. This is pretty good. It's not too bad. It's not too aggressive. We have a bunch of horizontal lines here, nice framing of the rear end, a little curvature for the ducktail right there. I'm not a huge fan of the lower part right here. This is too complex for me when you have these lines of the and the different colors as well. This is silver compared to the black diffuser, and then the black tailpipes inside of this silver massive box that we have going around the tailpipes. It's just too much going on here compared to the gracefulness of the first generation. But if we only look at this piece right here, I really like how this is framed, that the grille stretches all the way across from one point all the way to the other, and this is not a bad rear end, but it kind of ruins for me when we look at this in the side view, which I'm going to show you, of course, next here after we compare it to the first generation. So have a look at how clean this is compared to the current generation up here. Compare this design right here and the layout of all the lines to this elegant, clean lines that we have right here. Beautiful framing like this. This is the lines that frames the rear end right here. Simple lines. And then these air outlets right here are kind of mirrored from the front end. If we look at the front end, you can see that the layout is pretty much similar or the same to what we have right here, but it's just in the tail end. And this diffuser piece right here, this lower part is 10 times more graceful and elegant. The keywords that Audi themselves wanted to implement in the Audi R8. I think this is so much more beautiful down here than this piece right here, which, as I said, feels a lot more Lamborghini. This feels a lot more Audi. And here we have these two bazooka exhausts that I really like on the V10, and a simple diffuser like this. It doesn't have to be anything more complicated than that. So the graphics of the new Audi R8 is a little bit of a disappointment for me, at least in the front end. The rear end looks better, but it still feels a little bit too complex for me. But where everything really falls apart, I guess you could say, for me, is the side view. If we compare the side view of the current generation, compare it to the old generation, there's one line here that totally ruins the proportions for me for the new generation R8, and that is, if we have a look at the original here, as I said, these are the Quattro emphasized lines right here. As you can see how beautifully they just sculpt on top, right on top of each axle to pronounce the Quattro four-wheel drive system. And then we have the greenhouse, and this is where it gets interesting. If we have a look at the greenhouse of the first generation, you can see that it dips here, it goes in here, and then it goes into almost the top of this curvature here, and then it flattens out a little bit right here. You can see that it flats out, so it has a bit of a trunk, if you want to call it that, which is this surface, this plateau right here, and of course the beautiful angle angled upwards graphics of the rear end also is something that I really like about this design. Looking at the new generation, look at, first of all, the quattro lines here. They're still here, but they're more complex now, and the rear line starts all the way back here and then stretches way further forward than this line right here. As you can see, we have the blade here. This line ends before the blade, while this line now stretches almost into the door. But that's not the biggest problem here that I have with the new R8. Looking at the greenhouse starts right here, and then it just goes straight down all the way to this point. It never has this trunk upswing that we have on the original, and that brings me this noble M600 feeling of the side view of the new generation R8. And I also think that these lines, it just makes it look like the shoulder line here in the middle, it makes it look like it's dipping down here. We have the lines going this way, while on the previous generation R8 we have them being straight. It doesn't have this sloping rear end looking at the second half of the new generation R8, whereas in the first generation R8 a lot more Italian than the current generation R8, but not in a Lambo way, more in a Ferrari way. So those are the reasons why the first generation Audi R8 with the facelift is definitely my favorite Audi R8 of all time. The V10 with the bazooka taillight, simple, clean, and it also has a better integration of the Audi design philosophy, which, as they said themselves, and I've said it several times in this video, was in elegance instead of aggressiveness. And I think they've kind of gone off track a little bit with the new generation Audi R8. It's not a bad looking design, but it's nowhere near as beautiful as the first generation Audi R8.